it changes you as a person. It's, your one
That's
night.
the emails, the weird coded language in those. Last week that broke was Jay-Z added to the lawsuit with a Diddy lawsuit. Back in the day, I remember the WikiLeaks email drops and some of the stuff that never made any sense that people now think is fiction. The Podesta emails, the weird coded language in those emails. When you're reporting on that at the time, how I mean, I know that we were DMing about Frazzle Drip. I mean, I went down a dark rabbit hole and I said I had a bad night of sleep and some bad dreams, and I said I'm going to give up on that. But you're doing the WikiLeaks drop at the time, and there was the whole Comet Pizza business. There was the whole pizza related, what was it? A handkerchief with a pizza related map on it.
Yeah.
Real emails. I mean, how far down that rabbit hole did you go? What sense did you ever make of that coded language in those emails?
Too far. It changes you as a person. Your one night was, probably about 6 months for me of just, I mean, I've literally vomited from some of the things that I researched. And so let's not talk about it today. All of that was true. And, you used to get canceled and have people sue you for saying it, but it was true. All of the Comet Pizza stuff was true. It was true. Alefantis used to stalk me on Vote.
I remember Vote, VOAT.
Yeah.
Who is the person?
James Alefantis, the guy who owned Comet Pizza.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, it was a crazy time. It's not fun to talk about or think about, and that stuff goes on everywhere. And that's a great segue, Viva, into Diddy.
We talked about the news last week that broke was Jay-Z added to the lawsuit with a Diddy lawsuit. The lawyer is Busby, who's a very reputable attorney who's not dropping bombs without having backup, so to speak. And the P. Diddy business. I mean, I think everyone's mildly familiar with it, but let's break it down. And where are you at with that? How you've been following this, obviously not just from day one, but from before day one.
Yeah, so, it's just the next iteration of Epstein, in my opinion, at this point. And there's a few reasons why. So Jay-Z was added to a civil suit, but you've got the criminal suit ongoing right now in the Southern District of New York. And there are shenanigans in that lawsuit. I don't know if you've read any of it or are familiar with any of it.
I'm familiar with some of it, but one of the things at the time, I mean, we touched on it a month ago, maybe. One of the things that I found interesting in that indictment, this is the Diddy indictment out of New York, is that it was talking about trafficking, etc., but there was nothing about underage minor stuff to it at the time, despite all of these very, very credible rumors, if not, poorly kept secrets. And it still seems to be the case. So, I mean, the indictment is that he was involved in trafficking, but it didn't contain some of the salacious allegations that some of us were expecting. But tell us what's going on with that.
One of the first filings in that case was a filing, because that's how they do it there. It was the lawyer for Diddy complaining about the treatment that he got. And one of the things that struck me was that he was saying, he was trying to get bail for Diddy, right? And he's like, we've been working with the FBI on this. We've been working with the U.S. attorney's offices on this. And for some reason, CNN and all these other media outlets show up with cameras on the morning that they raid his house. They knew where he was. He was keeping them apprised of his location. He was not traveling when they didn't want him to. If he did go somewhere, he told them. He was working with these guys, waiting for the day when he would have to probably turn himself in. But they engineered a very public and very televised arrest and raid of his home, right? They said that they held his kids at gunpoint. And I'm like, wow, doesn't that sound familiar? We've heard that before. And just the way the government handled it was weird. So that flagged me right off the bat, because if you're alerting the media first, they did that with Roger Stone. They've done that with Donald Trump. It's not normal. But it got really crazy over the past 3 weeks or so, because the government's saying that P. Diddy is trying to intimidate witnesses, trying to obstruct justice and things like that. And Diddy's saying, no, I'm not. And
for the benefit of others, through not witness intimidation, but witness manipulation, which is what the allegation was not that he was threatening any of the witnesses, but he was contacting them, promising them things, whatever. And that was the extent of why they argued it was necessary to deny him bail. And back in the day, Tracy, when Barnes and I were talking about it, we were making the same arguments. For someone who's a flight risk, cooperating, for someone who's a flight risk to come back, other people were hypothesizing that this man thinks he's protected and that he's actually not going to get charged, which I think is sort of superficial at the point where, or I say shallow reasoning, we're at the point where they're at, where I think he knows the jig is up and something's going to drop by way of a hammer, which is why his incarceration in among the nastiest of prisons was not necessary given the conditions that he was going to agree to for bail. What went down the last few weeks?
All of a sudden, there was this pre-planned, quote, sweep of the prison, right? They were looking for contraband. They said it was pre-planned. They were looking for contraband. Well, what the government ended up doing was having one of the people that were doing this raid at the jail actually interviewed quote everyone, and then interviewed Diddy, took pictures of his notes, went into his locker, Viva, took pictures of his notes, took pictures of privileged documents, took all of his stuff, not drugs, not any of that stuff, his illegal notes, and had them sent over to the prosecutorial team for the government, and then told nobody about it. It didn't go through a filter team. It didn't go through anything. It just went right into their hands. And so the next time that Diddy's lawyers filed for bond, because they keep on trying to get him out, when the government responded to that, in there were details there was no way they could have possibly known unless they had those things, which is what alerted his attorneys, Diddy's attorneys, to the fact that they actually stole, for lack of a better word, client attorney privilege materials and used them in a filing against him. So the lawyers throw their hands up in the air and they're like, what are you guys doing? How did this even happen? The judge looks at the evidence in a hearing that was granted to them and says, you know what, you're right. Take that stuff out of there. And it needs to go to a filter team now. And the filter team needs to identify whether or not the stuff in here is privileged before you guys can see it, have it, use it, whatever. Still denies them bond. But this is what the government is doing. Now, if you could tell me, because you're an attorney and I'm not, okay? If you have a solid case for the things we talked about at the beginning of the segment here, are you doing something as significant as this under the cover of a contraband raid that takes a week in the prison, and then taking things that are labeled client attorney privilege and photographing them? And I mean, if you're the government, do you need that for your case?
Well, I've been having the pleasure, I guess, or displeasure in a way of talking to a number of people who are in prison, and they give you that warning that, this is a non-secure line. We're going to supervise this line, so nothing you say is private. If you're an attorney and you want the privileged line, you go through whatever system. And I trust that system like I trust, week old gas station sushi. Yeah. My only question is what does he have now that they could possibly need from him on the inside when they've basically seized everything on the outside and everything in everything?
That's a really good question. I feel like it's almost like they're trying to throw this thing. Truthfully, why would you do that? Now, is that true? I don't know. That's a speculative.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. To taint it the way they did the Alec Baldwin case, where I think it was Brady violations in Baldwin, that they ended up tossing the case and he walked free from the get-go. There were people hypothesizing, and this was my theory at the beginning as well, that the investigation into Diddy was actually just a way to take control of the video evidence that they now have in their possession, much like the Epstein video evidence that they have in their possession. I had Ian Carroll on last week talking about this, and for someone in the chat who said nothing like the Epstein case, there are people who believe that this is the entertainment subsidiary of the Epstein political scientific subsidiary. Do we have any idea what they seized and who's in possession of the material and who is covered or affected by the material or involved in the material that has been seized right now by the authorities?
The filings that have been made by Diddy's attorneys are heavily redacted, obviously. They're kind of at a stalemate right now because they're fighting over all of this. They took all of his papers. That's basically what they took. He had no contraband. Now, he's not innocent, okay? I'm not saying that he's in there, wrongfully imprisoned or anything like that, but he's innocent until proven guilty, which is why I was glad you said that in the beginning. It's true. And, he is kind of finagling the text system in there. He's using the email system to send people text messages. Like, he's doing some things he probably shouldn't be doing. But what could they possibly have that they don't have already, other than information traveling between he and his attorneys? And, where Jay-Z comes into this in this particular part is interesting, because there are a lot of influencers that we don't necessarily hang around with and tool around with, but they're, pop culture people covering this story. And like 2 weeks ago they came forward and they said, somebody is sending people to our house and they're offering us money to stop talking about this or to say the opposite of what we're saying. And they all went public with that. Somebody was offering them money to basically say the opposite of what they were saying and not bring certain folks into the conversation. Nobody could figure out. They said they were private investigators, Viva. Who were they working for? Nobody had any idea. Nobody could figure out who. They were being filmed. They were saying it brazenly out in public, right? And then Busby starts getting kind of attacked by the Jay-Z side. So Jay-Z
threatened for legal malpractice, threatened for extortion.
Yeah, and this Busby releases a partial transcript of a call where guys are saying, if you'll go say this, and this, we will pay you on behalf of our client, which like set off an alarm bell for me because I'm like, that sounds really familiar. So here's what I think. I think speculatively that Diddy and Jay-Z are very much involved in this together. Jay-Z is doing everything and anything he can to keep this out of the public sphere. Now Busby comes in and says, we're adding you to the civil suit. Whether criminal charges will follow, we have no idea at this point. And it is really kind of a survival of the fittest to keep this stuff out of the hands of the public so that they're not exposed to the public and then suffer those consequences as well. But it all ties together. And the shenanigans in the Diddy case are bad enough that I don't know if you ever heard of Joshua Adam Schulte. Have you ever heard of him?
Let me Google it while you tell us who Joshua Adam Schulte.
Yes, Schulte.
Joshua Adam. Let's see who comes up here. Okay, the case study, Joshua Schulte, a former CIA officer sentenced to 40 years in prison for espionage and CP crimes.
Yes.
Okay.
So just to give you an idea, he maintains to this day he didn't do it, but they accuse him of leaking the Vault 7 information to WikiLeaks. That was the CIA basically hacking tools that they used. He was in jail in the same prison that Diddy's in right now, right? He was representing himself and also had a public defender because his case was super complicated. So he needed to be able to represent himself to talk about some of the particulars. He actually won the first time. It was a mistrial the first go round when he represented himself. Just let that sink in for a second. But he had a laptop that they gave him to prepare his defense. He was only allowed to look at that laptop in a skiff inside the prison, right? They maintained control of that laptop at all times. He went into the skiff. They have to strip search you before you go in there in the prison. Make sure you've got nothing on you. They give you the computer in the skiff, then they leave. They actually put another charge on him for having child porn on the laptop in the skiff that was given to him by the government. Same exact, like it's almost, it reminds me so much of that case. And that's only one of the like nefarious things the government seems to have done.
It was Cheryl Atkinson, right? Who talked about how the FBI threatened or was planning to either they threatened or were planning to plant child pornography on her husband's laptop. Mm-hmm. And as if we think that they haven't done it. We also know that in the Jones case, what they said was that Jones had sent CP over to the defendants when in reality, people were sending, when he turned over all of his computers, from what I understand, he had been getting emails with stuff in it that he hadn't even opened that were in the junk. And some hypothesized that it was strictly a setup to get him in trouble and to let the media run with that headline. So, but okay, now let's sort of tie the loop on this. The FBI agent who gets sentenced for this, he was the one who allegedly is behind the Vault 7 leak, which Vault 7, was that the one that was revealing how the intelligence was going to take over cars and crash them for assassinations?
There was some of that in there, but it was really the hacking tools that the CIA uses. So it was all their information about hacking. He worked for the CIA. He was basically blowing the whistle about the lack of security at the CIA with he had an inspector general investigation ongoing at the time. Basically, their passwords were like password 123, and he was the security guy. And he's like, "You guys can't do this. This is crazy." But they pinned this leak. Now, I personally don't believe it was him. After reading the 7,000 docket entries in the case, I don't believe it was him. But the way they treated him is the same way that they're kind of weaseling around with Diddy here and the kind of the shady stuff they're doing, except they wanted him. And I think they're throwing the Diddy case.
It's interesting. Yep. Well, yeah, as in, it's an amazing idea. Some people were hypothesizing, let me get this chat. This is Maureen Brown. The timing of his incarceration prior to Trump's win is the most suspect part of the case, not necessarily prior to Trump's win. The raid on Diddy and then the celebrities with, I mean, I know it becomes something of an internet meme and we're playing like 1 degree of Kevin Bacon where everybody is 1 degree off of Diddy to some extent.
Yeah.
But the timing of it, and then the celebs that came out of the woodwork to endorse Kamala Harris, either for payment or for favor, you can connect those dots or you can choose not to, but the dots are definitely there. And then if they got what they wanted or needed, politically speaking, they've seized the evidence, much like they've seized the Epstein tapes. No one's going to see them until they need them to be used. And then Kamala Harris loses, and now they want to throw the case for Diddy and get him out, allow him to get out the same way Alec Baldwin got out for violation of civil rights and whatever.
It's just one angle of what they might be doing, seriously. But I cannot understand why they would need to do this unless there's something that he has that they want and they're looking for whatever reason, whether it's to make it public or keep it for themselves. I don't know. But there are very few reasons why a qualified government team who does this for a living all day long, they're criminal, they're prosecuting criminals, would do something this
egregious.
Abhorrent. Yeah.
And unnecessarily so. So for the time being, there are no underage accusations, allegations. It's RICO charges for sex trafficking. There hasn't been a superseding indictment as far as I know.
No.
Okay. So none of the underage stuff, despite the allegations. The civil suit with Jay-Z and P. Diddy. Who was it again that filed that suit? I forget his name now.
The attorney?
No. It's a Jane Doe in the civil suit, and that's
and Jay-Z's trying to unmask her. He's trying to force her to go public. Yeah, he's literally victim blaming and attempting to get this woman doxxed. I don't think he knows which one it is. There probably are several of them that he's wondering which one it is, or he's trying to ruin the girl's life. It's a terrible thing that's going on right now, and they're threatening everyday people with cameras in their face. So, yeah.